Chasing Static, That Old Wallpaper, and the Decagon House Murders. This is Staying In. Can I tell you an incredible story that I read about the other day online that is a story that took place in the throes of World War II in the Arctic Circle?
This isn't one of those weird Nazi experiments, is it?
Well, it's about a Finnish soldier. At this particular point, they were paired up with the Nazis against the Soviets. As you're probably aware, in around that time, to kind of keep the soldiers, fueled up, kind of like the equivalent, more or less the equivalent of like what those Monster energy drinks are now. They would just send tons of drugs to the front line.
Yeah. Okay, right.
Just keep them awake, keep them energized, and keep them focused on their mission. In the freezing, frozen tundra, on barely any sleep whilst you're getting shot at.
You're not talking about, Tums and paracetamol, are you? You're talking about...
I am not, Pete.
You're talking about...
I'm talking about...
I'm enjoying the fact that Pete's referring to Tums as drugs.
I just love the fact Pete's two go-to drugs are Tums and paracetamol, giving away far too much information there on what he generally needs.
No, the drug in question was methamphetamines, basically, and
so slightly higher on the chain than
slightly
Tums.
higher than Tums. The Finnish army sent like a job lot for the entire squad.
A job lot, like on eBay.
How much should we send?
Carry John.
Right, they sent 30 tablets, basically.
Yeah, a job lot. It's the collective term.
One job lot.
A baker's dozen,
30 tablets.
A job lot.
And this Finnish soldier who was there as part of this trip, they were getting shot at quite a lot, and he was very reticent about taking the drugs. Said, "No, I don't need them. Don't need them at all.
Yeah,
it's going to be fine."
They're dangerous.
And then he was like, "Oh no, I better take some. I am getting shot at now, and we're trying to run away." So what he did was actually
these
they're
will
in
make
snow.
me bulletproof.
They're on skis. So what he did, and this is his excuse. Because his hands were mittens, he wasn't that dexterous. So he tipped, he reached into his pocket tipped out the box into his hand. And you know how sometimes when you've got like, I don't know, Skittles or Tic Tacs, you go, "Oh, just pour me out one." "Oh no, you've poured me out more than one." "Oh well, I can't put it back in the packet, can I?" And he'd accidentally poured all 30 into his hands.
Okay, that would very much make you taste the rainbow, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would, definitely.
Yeah.
It would make you become the rainbow.
So what he did was he's like, "Oh, I can't just put them back in the packet." So he said, "I'll just take all of them." He took all 30 of them.
Okay.
And basically 2 weeks later, he blacked out, and he came around 2 weeks later, and he'd skied about 400 miles away from his platoon. But like, he had this extraordinary kind of trip. I think it was about 400 miles. It was a ridiculous distance where like...
It was 30 foot.
No, it was ridiculous. Like, at one point he recognised his allies because he just went hell for leather, just skied off and left everyone behind. Then he saw his allies in the distance. As he got close, he realised, "Oh no, that's the Soviets." And they were so kind of amazed that this one person was skiing through them, they just kind of let him pass. And he went through them.
I bet he felt amazing at that point.
He found this cabin, and he decided, "I'll just light a fire to keep warm," but it was a wooden cabin, and the whole hut caught fire. He was sat there just watching it just spread around the hut. He then went to a kind of another hut that had been previously occupied, I think, by German soldiers, and they'd booby trapped it. So it basically exploded, and he just woke up with the door handle still in his hand.
This is Fear and Loathing in Helsinki, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. And at some point he spent like 4 days following a light in a farmhouse window, and it turns out it was just the North Star. When he was recovered after this 2 weeks, even though he was fully he was back to kind of some degree of lucidity, he was incredibly tired, but even so his heart rate was still 200 beats per minute.
No.
Yeah.
No.
I thought you were going to say something like he woke up and found out that Hitler had died, and he just thought, "Did I? No, I couldn't. Maybe had I?" One of my, I think this is pretty apocryphal. I don't think it happened, but I believe at some time there was, talking of war, in the Cold War, there was a plan by the CIA to to airdrop condoms into the Soviet Union, and they were extra large condoms, but the CIA were going to label them medium to try and demoralize the communist bloc.
No.
By making them think that
I've heard
Western men are particularly well endowed.
Churchill did something similar during the Second World War, where to protect guns when soldiers were carrying them through water, they would drape condoms over the end of them, and they had to make extra big ones to go over the rifles. And Churchill just label them like British small or something, just to really kind of like irritate the Allies.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, it's good. It's good, isn't it, that in the midst of war and the horribleness that all pervades, that we can have a little bit of fun with dick humour, isn't it?
Yeah, the bounce prevails. Yeah.
We've had a question come
Cool.
through.
Hello.
I don't know if any of you checked the post.
Airdropped.
Yeah.
Airdrop from above, yeah.
Is it large or?
Hey. This is a question comes from Ben Tucker, sent via the gram
Thank you, Ben.
Oh, thank
or
you.
Instagram, for those who aren't down with the kids, at Staying In Pod. I had a very interesting chat with Ben via this, because I was fascinated by what he had started doing with some friends during lockdown, which was to play board games remotely via Zoom. Now, what I mean by that is not like a board game app, which a number of us played over Zoom, like Ticket to Ride. We've played over like several weeks, one game of Ticket to Ride, say, for example, or Root. We talked about that from Direwolf.
Yeah.
This is actual board games. So the people you play with own a copy of it, but it would be the case that you would either have one party kind of like masterminding it all, or you would have certain roles and responsibilities or certain sections divvied up across the people in the call. So it might be, say, for example, I don't know, one person rolls, the other person has the cards, and the other person moves on a board. I'm being very generic here. But I found that really fascinating, the challenges of the kind of the analog with the digital.
He's kept that up post-pan.
He has kept that up post-pan, Sam. You're absolutely correct. And he's asked us, I mean, he sounds like he's got it pretty sorted, to be honest. I don't know why he needs us, because I think it's such a great idea. If there's any board games that we would suggest as being quite good to use within that kind of forum, really.
Well, before we get into the board game side of things,
Here we go.
I would say if you've got a group that is happy to meet regularly to play tabletop games, I would strongly suggest you folks check out like a lightweight role-playing game, because if you're interested in tabletop stuff and you want to do stuff over Zoom, then that's a really good option for you. Same goes for things like play by post or play by email. So there's a lot of strategic games that work like that. So a lot of like getting closer to board games, I would say a lot of the like old school Avalon Hill games work particularly well as play by post. These big hex based strategic war games, they seem to work quite well. But for my choice of tabletop game, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tell you chess. Chess is the one.
Do you want to explain what chess is, Pete, to new listeners?
You know what? It's a bit too niche for all of you. I won't get into it, but
My favourite story of this year so far, because I keep a list, is the fact that, quote unquote, the World Chess Federation are trying to sex up chess at the moment.
For God's sake.
and not having much success. My favourite thing about the story is we covered it quite a lot where I work, and at no point of what must have been hours and hours of coverage of the World Chess Organization trying to sex up chess did anyone mention that one of the most famous chess players was literally accused of sexing up chess in order to cheat on a game. What would you do if you're going to sex up chess?
Well, I mean, I'd
play it over Zoom, obviously.
I mean, I'd lean into the mating quite a lot, but
Is that a popular theme? It's something I've missed.
I think Pete, as much as we play games, Pete has misjudged the audience he's giving these jokes to.
Yeah, for a new listener, that's Pete's answer to anything we ask him about how to. I would make the pieces a little bit more coquettish.
Yeah.
like cyber chess, but sort of like H.
Let's face facts. If you want to sex up chess, I'm fairly sure if you search the dark areas of the web, you'll find a sexy chess set.
Yeah, there definitely will be one. You know what? I'm going there now.
Okay. See you in a bit, Pete. I think that chess is a good call, but obviously it doesn't lend itself to big group.
I could offer an option, which you would, Sam, you probably in particular would perhaps be able to elaborate into other game types around this, but something along the lines of Escape from the Aliens in Outer Space. Because if you've got both parties have the game, they come with kind of the little dry whiteboards with the maps on, so you all agree on the map that you have, and the only real interaction part that doesn't necessarily work on Zoom is kind of the reveal of who is the alien, who is not. But you could do that over camera if you just all agree, okay, so-and-so, open your eyes and we'll turn your card over. Everyone close their eyes. Yeah. And then you do that for each person. So you could reveal that. And then once you've done that, it's all talking. And it's you're making notes on your own board.
Yeah, so you could do something like that with like Whitehall Mystery, where there is only one central map. That everyone's using anyway. So you could have the person playing Jack the Ripper on the other side of the call, and everyone else is surrounded by the map, and they're just trying to basically guess where Jack the Ripper's going. I think that could work. And as Kris, as you said, Werewolf is also a good option. Games like that, I think Werewolf over something like Resistance. Again, when you've got games that someone's got a hidden role, because then you just use the functionality in Zoom. So you just where you can send a private message to someone. So someone will have to be like the game's keeper, in instance something like Werewolf, so they know who everyone is, and they're like marking the time and explaining the roles, but they can just send little private messages to people to say, right, you are the villager, you're the witch, you're the werewolf. I think that would work quite well.
You could do Sherlock Holmes.
I was thinking that consulting detective.
I was thinking that, but wouldn't you be holding up pieces of paper for people to read?
No, I treat it like an escape room. So I would divvy up roles. So I'd give one group the map, I'd give one group the newspapers, one would get the interviews, and another person would be the note taker. No, because I think the way Ben plays, everyone owns a copy of the game.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Oh, right.
So that's how they do it, generally speaking. So I was thinking like a game like Quacks of Quedlinburg, I think would be quite good.
I think if everyone's owning a copy of the game, then my choices may change a little bit. So I would add into that something like So Clover or Just One. I think those could be really, really good games we played over Zoom. And then I'd also add into that Last Message.
Yes.
Where Last Message is a really cool game where someone has a Where's Wally style board. We spoke about it on an episode of the podcast. Someone has a Where's Wally board, and then they kill someone or say they're going to kill someone on that board. Then the player next to them knows who it is and knows where they are, and then they write notes on this dry white board, but then the killer gets to erase a certain amount of those notes, and then the other team have got to use those clues that have been erased, so they become like partial clues or hints basically as to which person on this map it is, to try and find that person. So if both teams have got a copy of the board, then that makes that really cool.
One game I was thinking of, which I actually was the only board game I played online during lockdown, was Welcome To.
Yeah, I think Welcome To is like the granddaddy basically of
it really is
Zoom games. Yeah,
like I literally had my mobile phone was on Zoom, perched above looking down at the decks. We actually had a separate camera feed for that.
Yep.
And then if you've got it on, you can get the app, so you can actually just fill in all the different results yourself there really painlessly. You can play that really casually actually as well, which might be quite a nice little filler before you move on to something a bit heavier, say, for example.
I think if you get imaginative with it, there's so many different games that you theoretically could play. Even something like Code Names or something, which naturally feels like it has to be played around a table. Like if you've got the cards laid out on camera, you could use a breakout room for the two people giving the clues to discuss it. You could even enhance the game by saying, okay, if you're giving the clue, you don't speak it, you type it in the chat, and you remove that element of perhaps giving something away in your intonation or anything like that. So you could, in some ways, like, I wouldn't necessarily improve, but you can add elements to it. And obviously you've got to factor in how you kind of, whoever's got the cards on their camera. They're the ones who have to apply the scoring and all that stuff. But those are very easy. So I think if you get imaginative, there's absolutely so many different kind of games that, fortunately, with the technology that we have kind of at our disposal, like being able to play board games with friends is kind of really accessible.
My final closing one, if you want to go Zoom specific and you don't actually need to buy a game to do this, would be to use Zoom's whiteboard feature and play Fake Artist Goes to New York.
Yeah, that's a really good shout. And actually, speaking of Zoom, there's things like the poll thing you can use to actually, for like social deduction games, when you're voting off a person, say, for example, you want to do it anonymously, you can do it that way. But yeah, I think that's a really, really good shout.
Cool.
I think now is also a good time to say we had a lovely email from Dennis.
Oh.
I won't read it out
Okay.
because I don't want to, embarrass us, them, because it was such a lovely email. And I just want to say thanks, Dennis. Thanks for sending that to us. It was
Thanks,
really nice.
Dennis.
It was lovely.
It was really, really nice. Stayinginpod@gmail.com. If you've got a nice email like Dennis, send it to us.
Please don't send us horrible emails.
Yeah, don't send horrible emails.
We're very sensitive.
Again.
Yeah. But
Unless you're being horrible just about one of us and nice to the rest of
Yeah.
us.
yeah, that's also totally fine.
If ratio-wise it works out to the benefit of the group, then that's fine.
If you imagine that by being mean to one of us, like the rest of us will enjoy it, that's like a 3-to-1 ratio, then that works.
Absolutely, because we're a group. We are, where we roll together, except for sometimes when one of us gets pushed out of the group.
I mean, if you want a lovely microcosm of that, the four of us got together on Dan's request and we played Back for Blood.
Oh, we did.
Oh my gosh.
So much fun.
It was really good fun. Back for Blood, then. It's Left 4 Dead. Let's not muck around. It's Left 4 Dead.
I remember when it came out and they were like, it's not a sequel to Left 4 Dead. And I was like, I looked at it, I was like, well, I mean, yes, it is.
Like, legally, it is not a sequel to Left 4 Dead. But
it literally is
definitely...
the title literally includes the words back.
Yeah, like
and 4.
The title is literally 3 bits with a number in the middle, right? Like, so it's Left 4 Dead, and if you've not played that, Back for Blood is a 4-player cooperative zombie shooter, and the idea is that you move from safe house to safe house. You complete these certain objectives, and there are regular zombies. They're the things that you kind of deal with on the regs, and then after that there's like specialist zombies. I have no idea what their real names are, but they basically just make them from Left 4 Dead. So for example, the boomer is or whatever it is in Back 4 Blood, is big boy, and when they get too close to you they explode and they do big kind of area of effect damage. And then there's a spitter which will climb up walls and shoot stuff at you, that kind of thing. It is very much that. And the idea is that you, because you do teamwork to make it through the space. Basically, the idea is there's too many enemies for one person to deal with, so you need 4 of you working together to do the thing. So, classic example of this is one of the levels, you have to take a bomb to a location, plant it, and then run away and get another bomb and do the same. And really, you need backup while you're doing it. So the idea is to work together, and the spin on it, so if you've played Left 4 Dead, you'll know all of that stuff. The spin on it is that there is a deck building element, which I thought initially I felt like this feels really weird, but is actually very smart.
Yeah.
And I think it's all the more impressive that Dan suggested this game, even though it's got deck building in it. Dan, what did you think of the deck building aspect of it?
I mean, I wasn't aware of the deck building aspect until I installed it. And the first thing I saw was the first task was create a deck, and I thought, what have I done? This is why they all were so up for it immediately. This is why I didn't have to talk any of them into it.
You sent your message being like, should we play this? And us all going like, yeah.
It's like me accidentally saying, should we play Magic the Gathering?
Yeah.
It'd be like, yes, Dan. So it is kind of like the standard kind of Left End. That whole card deck building stuff did, as you say, kind of feel a bit weird until you kind of understand what it is it's doing. And what it's doing is it's changing the way the game plays every time you play it. So it just changes it in a subtle way to kind of enhance. So for example, one of the cards that gets dealt might be positive or it might be negative. And if it's a negative card, it might say there is a horde, which is like a huge influx of enemies at a certain point. And so that run through of that level is suddenly so much harder. And so if you don't have that on that turn, it changes the way that game plays. And it almost creates almost like a roguelike type effect to it, that it's never quite the same every time you play it, which is really an interesting thing. I mean, yes, it threw me a bit, the whole card-based thing, but once you actually understand what it's doing, it's really interesting. And then on top of that, you've got kind of your standard deck building kind of thing of like adding stats to you based on the cards that you've got, and that's fairly standard within games. It's just not necessarily always as clear-cut as here is a card, I'm assigning this as part of your deck. What that doesn't make sense. What I found about it really interesting was that by no stretch of the it's not an old-fashioned game. It's really not. But obviously we played, like me, Sam, and Pete. We played. I don't think Kris did. We played Left 4 Dead back in the day, and we really enjoyed it. And playing this again now took me back to that. Not in a sense of, as I say, it's not an old-fashioned game, but it took me back in a weird way, like to just my younger days, and I like my mindset back into that period of time where I had such little responsibility compared to what I do now, and it was just like a really strange sensation because the game is so similar. It is Left 4 Dead. There's no bones about it, and the fact of it is they call it Back 4 Blood. They've not actually trying to get away from that fact, but it took me back to that kind of nostalgia, and it's not a nostalgia game like you can get certain games which are absolutely like, I want to remind you of your childhood and the games you played then. It's not doing that. But what it does, because it's so familiar, it's that kind of warm blanket, and it wraps you in like, okay, you're in a fun environment here. It's made for you to have friends, and it's that kind of game that suits our play style really well, where we just kind of want to have fun. We've played so many games which have got kind of serious, in-depth narratives, and we spend the entire game just running around laughing at each other and completely missing. I mean, Back 4 Blood has a narrative. I have no idea what it is because we spent the entire time laughing at each other and like, Pete, why did you do that? Usually that's what's happened. Or I see Sam sneaking over to the bird's nest, which if it goes off will attract loads of people. I'm like, Sam, what are you doing? We know what happens when we try these things. It invariably goes wrong.
Got myself a toolkit. I really like it, and I really like Left 4 Dead. But I remember that when we played it, we kind of like hit a brick wall with it at some point. Like there was a massive difficulty spike or something, and I think it completely put us off. But yeah, I think the deck building stuff is super interesting. Like the last time that we played, I picked up a card where every time I picked
Wolverine
up
claws.
Gold. Yeah, I had my Wolverine claws, which had a perk with them, whereas every time I killed something, I got some health back. So I literally had to like run into hordes with my Wolverine claws, and I was pretty much invincible because I could kill them, and every time I was killing something, I was getting health back.
And then I got Wolverine claws, tried to do that, but realized I didn't have that perk, and so I ran in and just died thinking, what am I doing wrong here?
Yeah. And then the card, one of the interesting cards I picked up was every time I picked up gold, I would flip a coin, and if it landed on heads, I'd get a 10% stat boost to my damage, and when it landed on tails, it reset that stat boost. And I was just like, right, yeah, okay, I'm totally on board now, because this is bonkers. This is just absolutely, messing with the formula. And whereas I feel like the more and more we played Left 4 Dead, it felt like it was getting more and more serious.
Yeah.
I feel with Back 4 Blood, like having some of those bonkers weapons in, like the Wolverine claws and cards that essentially let you gamble, I'm hoping it maintains that sense of like cheekiness that I quite like about those games, where they realise that this is a dumb zombie game
experience.
Yeah. I mean, it's still got moments where they're doing the Left 4 Dead thing, where they're doing like environmental storytelling. Like if you go up to the walls and you look at like some of the flyers or some of the messages, that sort of thing. Like they are still doing some of that, and if you sit and think about it for too long, it is a little bit bleak. Certainly, the goriness of the game is intense. Like those cinematics that introduce certain sections, they're they are gross. Like and rightfully so, right? Like it's a zombie game. But I agree with you. The fact that they kind of abstract out more of the mechanics means you take it less seriously, I think. I was never sat there like, oh, what is the deep lore of this? Partly because I didn't have time, but also partly because it didn't really matter.
No.
But it feels nice. It felt like the closest I've ever got to like the four of us just playing an arcade game together. Like we'd gone to the arcades. Like for example, I whenever I come into zombie kind of games, I'm not a really good horror game player on my own. I find them very, very tense, but there's something hilarious with the four of us because I'm comforted in the fact that it's not just me on my own, but my kind of predilection for the anxiety came forward where I skipped the opening cutscene because I wanted to get to the character choice because I wanted, okay, one of these people is going to have a shotgun. I'm Bagsying them. And sure enough, I got mother or mum, who's the kind of matriarch of the group, who has this amazing shotgun just called the Belgian. But what's really cool is the reload is the quickest I've ever had on a shotgun in any video game I've played. So I was just absolutely giddy. I was covered in blood within like 5 to 10 minutes because I was just firing and reloading just so rapidly. And that kind of giddy fun was hilarious. I know we've chosen consciously to play it on easy, and I think that's the best decision, really, to minimise that degree of intensity and to enjoy the ride.
I think the other thing is that it's really easy to go into a game like that and think this is a horror game and therefore I need to be really slow and methodical and all that sort of stuff. This is a game that like it wants you to take the fight to the enemy. Like it really wants you to move. And if you sort of dilly-dally or indeed shilly-shally, they will just come after you because it has a similar feature to Left 4 Dead, which is the director, I think it's called in L4D, which is basically the director basically is like an AI that says, all right, they've had it too easy for too long now. Right, here we go. Here's this problem, and you have to go and deal with it. Equally, so we're playing it as a 4. You can play it online with as a sort of competitive experience. So we're playing it as a cooperative experience. You can play it as a competitive experience wherein your opponents, so you're playing as a group of 4, but your opponents are essentially directing the zombies. So they can say, okay, I want them to have this trouble here, this problem here, this problem here. So you can take that on in multiplayer as well. But we've only played the actual co-op thing because I think, to be honest, like I don't really want to play it as a competitive game. I want to play it as an easy, quote unquote easy. We still died a whole bunch, but like having fun, like enjoying the gunplay, which is I think there is a genuine enjoyment to come from figuring out how all the different guns work and how to take on the various monsters, because each of them has like a strategy and a tactic that you kind of need to deal with as well. I was genuinely surprised at how good it was, actually. I thought it would be derivative, but it's actually kind of cool. However, I've also been playing an actual horror game recently, because tis the season.
Classic January horror.
Yeah. And it's a game called Chasing Static.
Okay.
So, Kris, this is going towards your wheelhouse.
Okay.
This is a walking sim.
Oh, yeah.
And what it does is it's part of a subgenre of horror. I think it's called something like PS1 horror. And it was this subgenre that took off on itch.io at one point, as far as I know. I'm sounding like an old man. Maybe this isn't even what it is, but I seem to remember this is I remember. And the idea is PS1 horror is basically take the aesthetics of the PS1 and the horror games on the PS1, but make a modern game. And Chasing Static was one of the ones that kind of did really, really well. It came out a few years ago on PC. They've just released it on PlayStation 4. I think they've just released it on Xbox as well. I think it's been on Switch for a while. But we got sent a review code for it, and I played it on PlayStation 4. And it's a walking sim that, and there's no spoilers here, but it cribs a little bit from things like Everybody's Gone to the Rapture.
Oh, ding, 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 ding.
So it takes this idea of like, who's around now? And what happened here?
That was the alternative title.
Who's around now?
Yeah. So
Poetic.
it takes bits of that.
Who's around there? Yeah.
And it marries it up with some of the Silent Hill aesthetics. So it's got a bit of that wobbly PS1 texture. It's got a lot of static. Whereas in Silent Hill, you have a radio that goes off each time there's a monster near with static. In Chasing Static, you have a quite literally like a radar gun that you point it in the direction, and you are quite literally chasing after the static to figure out what the thing is. So whereas in Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, you go, oh, there's a little light source over there. I'll go over there and trigger the next cutscene. Chasing Static is, oh, I can hear this thing on my radio pickup. I'm going to go towards that and figure out what happened here. And broadly, so it is set in Wales. Very close to us. So the developer is actually Bristolian, I believe. I've never met them, but they're
everyone in Bristol, don't?
Everyone who steps foot in Bristol has to come and just come and meet Pete.
Come round my gaff and I'll tell you whether or not you're staying. The Bristol game scene is relatively small, and I don't think I've ever met them. So they put out Chasing Static. They're doing they just finished off a Kickstarter for another game of theirs that looks kind of interesting. It looks like Silent Hill meets Cyberpunk. And but this is the one I was really, really interested in. And so it's set in Wales, and it's got it's got proper voice acting. It's lovely to hear a Welsh accent in a video game. It really is nice.
Oh, great.
And the storyline takes place in, a small, isolated village, basically. And the idea is you're uncovering what happened here and who you are. So you have a bit of amnesia. You're not really sure why you're there and what you're doing. And as the game goes on, you start to kind of piece together what happened here and who you are. And like I say, the big attraction for me going in was the PS1 visuals, that low rent, low
good.
poly, stretched textures. Oh, love it. But it licks along. It's 4 hours long, and I completed it in an evening. One session, start to finish, brilliant. Loved it. And it is horror, but it is also a walking simulator, and that's the thing that you kind of have to know that going in, because a third of the way through I sort of got into it and I was like, there's almost no threat here. Why is this?
That's a walking sim, yeah.
Yeah, but it always feels like there's threat. Even though I got right to the end of the game and I was still being really cautious, even though I was like, well, if they start adding in a combat mechanic now, this is way too late. But they didn't, but at the same time, there's always this persistent feel of what's just around that next corner. The other cool thing with it is it does the Silent Hill thing where it gives you multiple endings. So depending on what actions you take will determine the kind of ending that you get, and that will help you piece together your interpretation of what happened in Chasing Static. It's not as extreme an interpretation as in Silent Hill 2, which is it will, depending on what you do, it will completely change how you perceive that game. But it's enough to make you go, yeah, okay, I'll give that another go in a couple of months' time. It's great.
That sounds great, Pete. I will have to check that out, because that sounds like a beautiful kind of cocktail of things I really, really love. Have you played, it is a walking sim, but there is actual threat there. Have you played The Vanishing of Ethan Carter?
No, that's on the list.
Yeah, I'd be quite curious to know what you make of that, really, because that game has stayed with me somewhat in terms of a horror kind of esque kind of walking sim, I suppose, really.
Yeah, I thought it was really, really good. Like I say, it's out on basically anything that you care to mention, PC and console wise. And the developer is Headwear Games. It's been published by Ratalaika Games. I think they also did the console version as well, though I'm not 100% sure on that one. And Headwear Games' new game is a game called Hollow Body, and that's coming up in the near future. And it's made me go from okay, that sounds interesting, but, I won't back the Kickstarter, to, oh no, I didn't back the Kickstarter. I've got to wait months now to play this thing. So yeah, really interested to see how that ends up.
Can I ask you if any of you recently discovered something and then realised, oh my word, there's loads of stuff already like this that I've not seen either, and it's almost like you've kind of been mining away. And you just, your little metaphorical pickaxe and hammer. Oh no, you don't use those two things. That's a hammer and a chisel. Your metaphorical pickaxe, you chip away and you find this rich vein of stuff. I think, oh my word, this goes really far.
Not recently, but a few years ago, I thought to myself, why do I feel all funny sometimes when I hear whispered voices? And then when I found out, oh, there's this thing called ASMR on YouTube, I immediately then went, oh. Like, I was like, oh, this is just a thing that a whole bunch of different people... And not only that, not only do a lot of people experience it, but there's like so much weird content for it as well. Like, I was like, oh, wow, this is not only is it a rich vein, it's like gushing out all over me.
Some bold imagery you're putting out for us, Pete.
So sorry. So Pete, you took umbrage with the fact that you weren't the only one that experienced this sensation.
No. It was more like sometimes I would have that feeling and be like, I wonder why this happens. Like, I didn't put two and two together, and then I found out like there was this whole sub community of similar weirdos like me on YouTube, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. And yeah,
I mean, I'd have a response which I think is probably more in the wheelhouse that Kris was looking for than Pete and his gushing group of people. Like your favorite film, Kris, like RRR. Like when I watched that recently, and then you kind of see the other films in that. Other kind of films in that genre and by some of those filmmakers and stuff, it did feel like a style of film that I've just not seen before, and suddenly there is like a whole range of films that are open to that I've never heard of. Like even the kind of the Tollywood idea, like never even heard of that. So that's a whole new genre for me to kind of explore in the future.
For me, I've been going to sleep with my Sony Sleep every night since I got it, and did you hear the story today about how actually the best music to listen to when you're going to sleep is really upbeat and quite fast?
Really? Like
Bruno Mars's Uptown Funk apparently is a brilliant song that helps you go to sleep. Did you see this today? Yeah.
I mean, I'm never going to think anything other than an audiobook is going to send me to sleep. Bruno Mars is not taking over from Stephen Fry and Andy Serkis. I'm sorry, he's not.
I don't know who Bruno Mars is, but I'm willing to bet that this is not true.
Oh, it is true. Scientists have done
Oh, well. Well, okay, right. Well, as long as it's been peer-reviewed in Nature. Did you know, if you listen to Bruno Mars... is that you, Bruno? No.
Okay, analysis of more than 225,000 tracks from sleep-related playlists found 31% of songs are unexpectedly energetic and faster in tempo, like Coldplay's The Scientist.
But that would mean that 69% of them are not upbeat.
Yes, but
I mean, there's a flaw in the outcome that they've reached there.
Yeah, they're outnumbered. But I guess what it's saying is that
it's a surprising number still.
Yeah, it's a surprising number because that's the sort of rich vein that I've been shoving open recently. Is that so? I've been sleeping my Sony Sleep, and I don't like to listen to stuff that I know or I particularly want to listen to. But the amount of sleep playlists on Spotify and the variations, there's like baby sleep, deep sleep, hyper sleep, just sleep, relaxing sleep, and it's just like, what kind of sleep do I want to go for? I think tonight I'm going to actually listen to, and here's another story I heard today. I'm like one big sort of news aggregator. There's a very famous piece of music called Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, which sounds like it's ripped straight out of a Studio Ghibli movie. It's one of my favourite pieces of music. It's by a composer called Ryuichi Sakamoto. And that composer made the news recently because he was in one of his favourite restaurants. And whilst he's eating his meal, he went up to the manager and goes, "Is this seriously what you're listening to?" They're like, "What?" Okay, is this seriously the music that you're playing in this restaurant? So he's created a Spotify playlist just for this restaurant, and you can get it on Spotify. So I'm looking forward to listening to his bespoke playlist for this restaurant.
I'm sorry. No, hold on. I take umbrage with this. This is the person, and I'll bet this was you, Sam, at parties in your youth, where this is the person who's hanging out by the CD player at a party and going, don't worry, I'll look after the music. And it's just all It's all. I'll bet you when it was you, it was stuff like Fortet and like what else like
Was
Bonobo and in even younger days things like Prodigy and stuff like that. I'll bet that was you. But it sounds like that guy. Do you mind if I just? I'm enjoying my steak and chips, but can I have? Can we make sure that we put on Bruno Mars's Christmas song or whatever it is that he does?
Oh my word! So the rich vein of stuff I discovered.
Oh yeah.
yes.
Was an entire subgenre of literature called. And I apologise for any listeners from Japan who've got any Japanese heritage.
Okay, here we go. Here we go.
This feels problematic.
I think
Does it begin with an H?
It does, yeah.
It does.
It's called Honkaku.
Honkaku. Okay.
Honkaku,
Okay.
which broadly means like the golden age of detective fiction.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm immediately interested.
Yeah. So I went down a reel, and I'm still on that rabbit hole at the moment of whodunit. I love a whodunit. My appetite was whet quite a bit through Only Murders in a Building, which we're just about to finish season 2, and we're eking it out as long as possible because it is so good, and I just want them to keep making it forever. See How They Run, which was a lovely kind of homage to the kind of Christie stories of old. This one, though, is ostensibly a kind of Christie story that is not a parody of sorts. In fact, it is a real love letter to it.
Huh.
And this author, Yukito Ayatsuchi, wrote this novel that I read, and I've hoovered it up so fast, called The Decagon House Murders. Now, some caveats here. I love a murder mystery, but I'm not really interested in character. I'm interested in the kind of who elements. I'm interested in the puzzle of it all.
Yeah.
If you like character, this isn't going to be necessarily for you. That's not to render the author a disservice here, but if you're like me and you love that, and then there were none, and you like that kind of sense of the who done it, and you like that feeling of attention that, okay, I know these are the suspects. They all seem like they're not suspects, but one of them clearly is the murderer. You'll love this. This ostensibly is the beginnings of this kind of subgenre, and this book was published in 1987, published into English in 2015, and I love is there are tons of books in the genre that are getting translated into English more and more. There's a pre-order for the second book in the series, which came out also in the 80s, which isn't hitting the UK until March this year. And it's amazing. It's like, it's almost like I haven't got to wait too long. These books already exist. I've just missed them. And very tight, very short, like And Then There Were None. And it's got a gorgeous premise. So it's basically 7 students who are a member of a student society, which is called the Mystery Club, and they basically love mystery stories, like all the ones globally. And there's this kind of tradition within their society that they all have kind of like code names or nicknames, like homages to their authors. So there's a character called Agatha, for example, who's named after Agatha Christie.
Sure.
And they decide to go to vacate to an island called Tsunojima, which is off the coast of Japan. And they've chosen that spot because they thought it'd be a good trip, because I think like a year and a half ago, 6 months ago, the eccentric architect that owned that island, him, his wife, and a couple that was staying with them, they were all mysteriously killed on this island, and their house was burnt to the ground. And these 7 students have come here to kind of get some inspiration for the writing of their own mystery stories, but also they think it's quite a cool backdrop. And the only building that's still left is this kind of novelty kind of structure called the Decagon House, which is exactly, as you can probably get in the title, 10 sides, neatly segmented. And at the beginning, a la The Name of the Rose, you get a map of the Decagon House and go, oh yeah, this is great, I'm loving this. A little bit like, Murder on the Orient Express, where you get the map of the train.
Yeah.
And over a series of days, they get killed off, or they're getting killed off one by one. They're on this island. And Then There Were None style. They make a reference to, this is like And Then There Were None. One of them is the killer. One of them has to be the killer. But the interesting wrinkle that delineates it from, say, And Then There Were None, is that the story shifts. It alternates. So you spend some time on the island with these 7 students who are kind of getting into that suspicious element and trying to puzzle it out and using their knowledge of detective stories to try and piece it together. You go off-site to the mainland, where two of the members of that society, or two former members, I should say, who didn't go on the trip, they each receive a note about a particular former student of theirs saying that that person was murdered. That's really weird. And everyone in this organisation, this society, has received this letter. So they're trying to solve the mystery of what happened on that island a year and a half ago or 6 months ago, at the same time as the students on that island are trying to work out who is their killer amongst them and what connects these two seemingly disparate things. And I devoured this book. I cannot remember the last time where I literally said, can we just go to bed now so I can just read? I got to a point when I was on my own one night and I got scared.
That's great.
Because I was like, I generally am a bit nervous because, and it's that lovely kind of sense of fear because you know that these people around you, your friends, but one of them, it seems, is a killer. How is this possible? And that sense of like distrust amongst the group, it's fantastic. I love that feeling so much.
You mentioned Orient Express, and you mentioned that there's a like some visual stuff with this book. There is an audiobook version. Would it work as an audiobook, or do you need that visual?
No, you don't need that visual. I was a little bit worried when I saw the diagram. I think, oh my gosh, am I going to have to kind of like work it all out like I did with Orient Express? No, you don't need that at all. There was a bit though when I got to the end when the reveal happens. I was like, wait, what? And my partner just saw me just frantically turning back through the book, thinking, oh my word, I need to read this again.
Okay.
And yeah, like I think it worked fine as an audiobook.
Okay.
Definitely. But like if you like that classic kind of Christie thing, but not done in necessarily a parodic way, not done in a kind of wry satirical way, a la someone like Anthony Horowitz, who's probably the only other author I can think of contemporary, which, you know, Sam and you and I have spoken about quite a lot at length.
Yeah, I read one of his most recent books, and it's really weird because he's one of the main characters.
Yeah, that put me off.
So he creates like a fictional detective, but he's in it as himself. And there's an entire chapter where he recounts a real life meeting that he had with Peter Jackson and Steven Spielberg about writing the script for the sequel of Tintin. And no matter how earnest and sincere he writes it on the page, it does come across a little bit like, and let me tell you about the time that I had a sit-down meal with Oscar winner Peter Jackson and Oscar winner Steven Spielberg.
There are two things I cannot stand that when writers do it, and they always fall into it. Look who I know, right? And writing about writing. Those are the two things that really infuriate me. When a writer goes, let's talk about how important writing is. It's just like, let's not. Why don't we instead do literally anything else?
The actual mystery was really good, but I just I struggled when he started bragging about how many seasons of Midsummer Murders he'd written. It's just really weird. It's just a strange way of telling a story. But anyway,
whereas this is very kind of lean. Like if you're looking for something that is a little bit more elaborate in terms of its characterization, you won't get this here. And that's fine with me. It's like the Holmes stories of old, where it's not about the character, it's about the problem, it's a solution. I don't really care about the characters per se. I'm interested in the problem itself. And I think that's why, as much as I love Jonathan Creek, which is very much a howdunit, I think what gets me all spine tingly is the whodunit. And this has now become my favourite whodunit. For over a decade and a half it's been, and then there were none. This for me, that's just for me. I'm not saying it will necessarily chime in the same way for you, but this is like, you know, going back to that analogy of, you know, hacking into that vein. It's like, oh my word, this feels like someone's just for me. And there's tons of these books now that I know that are there, and they're in this kind of format of like The Locked Room, or, you know, that kind of stuff. I love this so very, very much.
Yeah, the genre itself translates as orthodox, and I get the impression that probably the reason why it's filling that particular hole in you, Kris, is that whereas the murder mystery genre is kind of currently it being pulled apart, putting back together, analysed, then being pulled apart again, which has led to some really great stuff like Only Murders in the Building and Glass Onion and Knives Out.
Yep.
But I feel like, especially with things like Glass Onion, they're using the genre to say something, to make a commentary about something. Whereas here, because it's orthodox, the mystery is front and centre. Like, the mystery is, you should be able to work this out. All the pieces are here, just like Christie would write a mystery novel. Just when I thought that themes of board games couldn't get any bonkers.
Well, up until now, Sam, what has been the most bonkers theme you've encountered?
Probably Lacrimosa. I feel a board game about helping Mozart's sister compose his last Requiem, whilst also sharing memories of all the brilliant times we spent with Mozart travelling through Europe, is a pretty out there, buck wild theme. Like, any theme that gets me to buy the Magic Flute, perform it once, and then sell it because it's trash. Like, just absolutely love it. Love that game. Yeah, it's selling a job lot. And, like, board game themes come and go. Like, I've literally, in the post this today, received a game from WizKids, which is called Rebuilding Seattle.
Ooh.
And it's just like, it's a polyonimo building game where you're rebuilding Seattle. Like, theme-wise, seems very appropriate, but, seen those kind of things before. So imagine my surprise the other day when in the post arrived from AEG a game called That Old Wallpaper, which, if you were to...
No.
It's like they're just sending you stuff now to see. Do you think he'll look at this? I don't know. Just send it to him.
It's like they're sending him stuff that doesn't actually exist. They're doing it just to see. Will he cover it? Will he?
Just as a
will
prank.
he believe that there is a real board game?
What will he pretend the meaning of this game is?
Yeah.
It's weird because there wasn't even a rule book. There was nothing. It was just
It was just an old roll of wallpaper.
Yeah, if you were to glance at this in the shop, I think you'd be forgiven for thinking that it was That 70s Show, the board game, because the iconography they use is actually very similar to that like TV show. That's kind of what struck me when I first started sort of unpacking it. The art, by the way, by Matt Paquette and co. is superb. Like, if you look at images of it, it is the one thing that stands out. But what this game is actually more like, Chris, it's more like something like A Gentle Rain.
Oh, hello.
But instead of having a lovely meditative solo experience where you're pushing tiles together to create matching patterns, here you're having a competitive experience where you're competing to see who can remember your grandma's wallpaper best.
We've all been there. So it's competitive meditation.
It's competitive. Yeah, just like Buddha intended. So how the game works is you have a central pool of these wonderfully decorated cards in the middle of the table that, as a group, you will draft and then you add into your tableau. And at the end of the game, you'll get points depending on how many pairs of those particular patterns that you can get together. So there's like big versions of a pattern, and then there's like a smaller version of that pattern. So one's like a big, bright sun star, and then the smaller version is 4 little suns in a diamond. And there's other little things in there like unique shapes like a square and a triangle and a diamond, and if you collect some of those into your tableau, you'll get points at the end of the game, and blah blah blah. I think where this game really shone for me is in the drafting mechanic, and it's a very, very simple way that you get cards. So unlike something like Acropolis, probably the most recent example that we've spoken about, where you take it in turns to select one of the cards or one of the tiles from the central board, and it uses like a monetary system to sort of guide you to which ones you're allowed to get. Here you have, each player has a hand of 5 cards, and on those 5 cards will be a number from 1 to 10. So when you put a card down, you're essentially trying to bid to get the card that you want. Cards closest to the stack of wallpaper pieces are low, cards furthest away are high. So if someone puts down a 1, they're going to get the card that's closest to the stack. Yeah. If someone puts down a 10, they're going to get the card that's furthest away. Easy. The trick of the game is when you're trying to get cards that will complete your perfect little pattern, that are around the middle. And that is where this game of quite simple little tableau building and pattern matching really comes to life, because with the group that I was playing it, the amount of times that someone would turn over a number and go, "Oh, I can't believe, oh, why did you," the absolute indignation that someone on purpose, but not really, played a number that was just like one higher or one lower than yours, which meant that they just able to like sneak under the radar and nab the exact thing that you were looking for. And like, I love moments like that, just when a simple turn of the card and then the table is able to erupt in laughter as there's an immediate understanding of what's gone on in this scenario. And That Old Wallpaper, like, just rattles along, and it's, turn after turn, everyone's turning over cards, and it gets to the point, like at the end of the third round, that there's almost like a mind quality to it as well, where you're kind of looking in people's eyes and going, right, what number are you going to play? And can I be smart here and try and go a bit higher than you, thinking that you're thinking that I'm thinking that I'm going to go high, so I'm going to try and position myself above you. And it was just one of those games that when you play it, and there are tons of games like this, reminds you of something that you really like about that shared experience of playing games with people. Like, I think in terms of like gameplay and aesthetics, and if you find it actually appealing, I feel like That Old Wallpaper, your mileage might vary. If you see it and like the design of it, I think you will enjoy the game. But for me, the one thing it did was just really make me sit back and go, this is just one of those things that I really love about board games, and it's just a game that's just bringing that all to life.
Sam, can I ask? And incidentally, appealing is a very good wallpaper pun. That kind of, does that wallpaper aesthetic actually come across, or is it just like, oh well, it's just geometric shapes that make the pattern? Do you feel like you're dealing with fragments of wallpaper? Yeah,
it does, because, and it's actually really funny, because you get really, a bit like the same in Gentle Rain, you get really, really itchy when you can't match a pattern. And you get to, oh, that's really... And if you've ever put wallpaper up in a house, like, it's that same feeling of, this doesn't quite... this is not quite matching. And you spend ages, like, just trying to match the patterns and trying to get it working. And looking around the table, there was 5 of us playing this game. It plays from 2 to 5. There's 5 of us playing this game, and the whole table was literally covered in this, like, colourful wallpaper.
Oh, amazing.
And you do feel like it's... you have been able to create something that is actually quite genuinely aesthetically pleasing, if that's your
that definitely works for me. That's brilliant. And in terms of that drafting, how do they scale that for the different players? Because I think I can imagine it being quite a challenge in that drafting and playing cards with there's 5 of you. How does it work if, say, there's 2?
So if there's 2, there's a grandma player who's like a sort of a NPC who takes part in the drafting.
So you say grandma player as if that's the most normal thing in the world. What's a grandma player?
Well, I mean, like, in the game, it's just an NPC, but in the game they refer to it as grandma. It's not like a board game terminology. So that central drafting mechanic is just electric and reminds me, the best things about playing board games, where it just generates those incredible moments. It's a pretty good game.
I feel we should be whispering this bit, just because I know Pete has a little thing for that.
Does anyone else feel a bit icky for when Pete feels weird, quote unquote?
Overshared. Don't be embarrassed of my tingles.
I'm not embarrassed. I just don't want you to be embarrassed.
Good.
No one is here to kink shame.
No. Tingle shame.
We're not going to yuck his yum.
If we've brought tingles to you, why not get in touch?
Yeah, please let us know.
Feeling them tingles.
Stayinginpod@gmail.com. Subject line: tingles.
Yeah. Tell us what part of the podcast gave you tingles specifically.
Yeah, that would be good to know, actually, because then we could just do that over and over and over again.
Yeah, exactly. And then we can be as famous as all those ASMR lot. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. They'll also, I mean, to varying degrees, will give you tingles. The Instagram will give the hardest amount of tingles, I would suggest.
Yeah.
Yeah, that those go full tingle.
Those go full on tingle.
And there's a post on there of that old wallpaper that Sam spoke about.
There is. Oh, yeah. So you can see what it actually looks like on the table.
And that it's not just a couple of scraps of wallpaper that a company sent to Sam just to see what he would do with
Some
it.
sort of like early April Fools. I will also post.
He'll do anything.
I'll post a picture of Chasing Static as well at some point because it's a very visually appealing game. So I'll pop that up there at some point soon. Might even be up there by the time you listen to this. Who knows?
Okay, yeah. So Instagram, go there, and sometimes Twitter, and sometimes Facebook too. Staying in pod. We spoke briefly about Spotify playlists in the episode, and so if you'd like to hear our Spotify playlist curated by Kris Darby, then there is a link in the show notes.
And thanks to Dennis and Ben from getting in touch. Thank you. That was lovely.
Yeah, that was lovely.
And hopefully, Ben, we've given you some additional games for you to play via Zoom.
Let us know which ones you did, because it'd be good to kind of share that, and we could try it as well.
Sounds great.
All right, then.
Bruno Mars's The Lazy Song. Tomorrow, I'll wake up, do some P90X, meet a really nice girl, have some really nice sex, and she's going to scream out, "This is great!" Brackets. "Oh my God, this is great!" Close brackets. Yeah.
Good night.